Welcome or welcome back to TSC Talks, the podcast inspired by the condition known as tuberous sclerosis complex. My name is Jill Woodworth, and I am your host. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today on the podcast, my guest is Stacey Jackson. Stacey is a special needs advocate, mother, engineer, and she's here to update us on her daughter's out-of-district placement in a program in Sandwich, Massachusetts, and also engage in a discussion on the transition process. We both have young people that are transitioning to adulthood, and I appreciate Stacey coming back on and talking to me. She always comes well prepared. Again, she talks about keeping the big picture in mind, not getting bogged down with the details, and how sometimes in a program such as the one her daughter is placed in, that is the advantage, is there's more of a big picture type scenario, and the nitty-gritty details might be on an IEP locally that kind of fog the full view and can be limiting for an individual where they're immersed in a social setting that they can learn a lot of these things naturally. So we talk about that. And we've got more cannabinoid medicine podcasts coming down the pike, or whatever you want to call it, on the podcast coming up. I'm not going to keep talking. I don't want to keep you guys waiting to hear this great podcast and what's next. So just keep tuning in, and thanks so much. Take it away, Stacey.
Thanks, Stacey, for being willing to be on the podcast again and update us with what's been going on in your life since your daughter's placement since we talked about a year ago. And I think when we talked about and early intervention and her history, and then the decisions you had to make in advocacy over the years, and your activity on the school committee. So we're kind of going to pick it up here, and I asked you to be on again and just kind of give me an update with what's going on with the out of district placement and anything else that comes up. So thanks for being on.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. So anyways, that was quite a little intro there. Could you, so Meg is in Riverview, and that's in Sandwich. So,
yes. Yep.
And she is currently a junior.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So
okay.
She just started her second year there, and it is a private special ed school, like you said, in Sandwich, Mass, out on the Cape. It's a school of about 200 kids. About half are middle school and high school, and the other half are post-grad, typically ages 18 to 22.
Okay.
And it's a whole school of kids just like her, with the same challenges and strengths that she has. And it's just amazing to see that, she's really found her tribe there. She's surrounded by kids that are right at her level. So the benefit of that is not only can they do academic instruction right at her level, but she's surrounded by peers socially that are at her level, that are going to, wait out her processing time and give her a little more patience if they can't understand her articulation. So it's been wonderful, because not only has she made so many amazing friendships with other kids, but she's made so much progress both academically and socially.
That's awesome. It sounds so well thought out, this program that she's in, Riverview. And, I think I'll just share this here with, like I said, he did get the academics that he needed. And so now he's ready to learn, and he's into the post-grad. And, I feel like there's just such an uneven skill set, but a lot of times it's the lowest common denominator in situations. And I think that the more individualized programs can be, and it sounds like this one kind of takes that into account.
Right. It just makes such a huge difference when they can get instruction right at their level. And it also promotes independence too. In the past, when it was in district, we pushed for inclusion as much as possible. But on the flip side of that, in order to be included and be in some of those general ed classes, she needed a one-to-one paraprofessional who was there to break things down and modify her curriculum. Whereas at Riverview, all the instruction is right at her level, so she can access that independently and doesn't need to rely on a para to break things down for her.
Yeah, that's a big difference. I can see how that would be really advantageous. So, what has been her biggest areas of growth? And then, any challenges? I think that, that would be good too.
Yeah, so it was interesting. You know, we saw great growth throughout the school year last year. We'd go visit her almost weekly because I was that neurotic mom who just couldn't let go. So we were there
well,
visiting, having
young.
dinner with her.
Yes. That's young. It's not the typical timing.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah. And she's always been,
right. She's got
less mature than others her age.
I get it. Yeah. I would be the same way.
So to go off at age 16, that was a big ask for me. So we were there a lot, and we did see great progress and great growth there, but it was really fascinating. She didn't participate in the summer program. We had some family commitments and things. So she was home with me for 3 months the summer, which was just amazing because we were really able to see how much growth she had made. You know, we tried to keep up with academics, and, one day I sat her down and said, let's write a paragraph that you can email to your teacher outlining some of the things that we've been doing just to work on the writing and keep in that habit. And she sat down and wrote this, what looked like a paragraph, but it was a giant run-on sentence.
I love it.
Which was kind of typical of, what I was used to with her. And I said to her, okay, now you need to really go back and edit. And in the past, she really needed a lot of prompting. Okay, read over this part, what needs to be changed. And she read it to herself, and she looked at me and she said, that's a lot of ands, and that's a really big sentence.
Wow. Good for her.
I was just amazed that she caught on to that, but then independently was able to go through and break it up and make it into sentences and take out all the ands in there. And, that was just so amazing to see because I hadn't, really sat down with her to practice writing during the school year with her being away at school. So that academically, kind of blew my mind. And then socially, she's been around this group of amazing peers throughout the school year. So all summer, she's texting with them and they're FaceTiming her. And, that was awesome to see. Yeah, which, she had never really had that degree of social connections before.
And that's a big problem.
And also, there was one day I was driving her to a friend's house, a friend from school, and, a couple of the other girls from school were texting her, just a simple, hey, what are you up to today? And she looked at me and she said, well, I can't tell them that I'm going over my friend's house because then they would be jealous. And the idea that she was able to process all of that and think about their feelings, I was just kind of blown away by, wow, you definitely would not have come up with that yourself last year.
That's beautiful. It really is. Yeah. Because, as a parent, that I see that struggle with getting those little things that don't seem like a big deal, like texting and social media. It really limits, it really is a barrier to connecting with social groups and for kids
and to
struggle.
have those social connections is just so important for all kids.
It really is, and I think that's one of the things that I've tried as much as possible to advocate for is teaching texting or using the phones and whatnot. And it's been really hard to get them to put that on the IEP,
Right.
Because, there's not it's got to be an objective or a goal or whatnot. And, they kind of wrote it in there or whatnot, but I can see how if she's she's being kind of reached by the curriculum and kind of more normal with, it's just, she's not, doesn't feel as isolated or whatnot and easier to,
Yep. Yeah, and then on the challenges side, the start of the school year this year, she went back and she just had so much more self-confidence because she knew the place, she knew the people, she knew the kids, she knew the teachers, she knew what to expect, which was great. And we had some initial bumps in the road with the roommate, which is very typical. They like to change the roommates up every year just to give them exposure to different kids. Mm-hmm. And, this one particular roommate, great girl, but just, like anyone, they're getting used to living together and, everyone's little quirks and idiosyncrasies, could drive other people crazy sometimes. And that's perfectly normal. But she did such an amazing job. I was talking to her one night and she hadn't really said of any roommate concerns, but out of the blue, she said to me, I need to talk to my advisor tomorrow. And I said, okay, that's great. That's good that you're going to ask for that. I said, well, what do you want to talk to her about? And she was good. She recognized that the roommate was in the room and she couldn't really say what she was feeling in front of her.
Uh-huh.
And she was able to just say, well, I want to talk to her about a few things. And sure enough, the next day she asked to speak to her advisor and was able to very eloquently share her concerns. And, you know, that was something that we hadn't seen a lot of self-advocacy from her in the past. Whereas this, you know, you don't wish your child to have any conflict, but when they do have conflict, it's a great teaching moment, and you can also see what they're capable of and what they will do for themselves. So sure enough, she brought up her concerns, and her advisor worked with her residential staff, and they put some things in place, and they're going to continue working with the kids and, you know, making sure that there's no issues in the future. But we were just, you know, so impressed that Meg was able to take a situation and self-advocate for, you know, we need to make some changes to the way things working because it's not working for me now. And that, you know, that's just such a great skill that without that conflict, I don't think she would have done that. So, so that was great, you know, just to show what she was capable of doing.
Yeah, like really accessing some higher level thinking, executive functioning because of the, you know, and I think that if she was, well, I wonder if living at home, I know as a parent, there's a lot of times where there's that impulse to step in and, you know, I kind of think, well, there's no way they can do that. I've got too much to do. I'm just going to do it, you know, but if they're not there and they have to do it themselves, you know, it's exactly. And so that's a perfect example. That sometimes, you know, that independent, like away from home situation really is advantageous. Put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm thinking Meg is going to come out of high school so much more independent than my typical child that's in high school
I'm
now.
like listening to you. I'm like, geez, yeah. I'm thinking of my 15-year-old here, and I'm like, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really awesome. Yeah. And you know, that what a swish for her, you know, coming through a lot of challenging situations that all our loved ones do. In this world. Yeah. So future plans.
Well, I'm such a planner myself, so I'm always looking 12 steps ahead. Couple of things that I'm working on right now is Meg's going to be turning 18 at Christmas time, so I'm going through the guardianship and applying to DDS, and I'll be looking into Social Security and all those other things that go into turning 18, which is a little daunting. That's, you know, a good sized learning curve that I'm going through right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of help, but it's huge.
Yeah, there's just so much to consider, and I do feel like there's so much more support when the kids are young and finding a good advocate and things like that, but then as they get older, I don't know if it's lesser known or there's just less support there. And
it's there.
You know,
it's there. Yeah. It's just very siloed. That's the only way I can put it. There's great hubs that have wonderful programs, but there's one there, and again, if nobody's communicating, you're going to be the hub, as you already are, but there's not a lot of, like, you can't trust that anybody's going to make that extra step and connect like they do when they're under 18, you know, in the school district as much, and so that's what I've discovered. It's a lot of squeaky wheel.
Yep. Yeah.
You sound like you're really on top of it. And, you know, somebody told me the DDS and people have said, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I have like these email chains with like 20 people in them, and I just keep everybody on the same page. And that seems to be a very effective technique when you're looping in different professionals that are in different locations, and you know what you're talking about, like, as you do. They respect that and they respond, I've found.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
It seems like it's just such a totally different world than the education system. So that's a big adjustment there.
You'll be fine. I know you will be.
Thank you.
Yeah. So future plans, you're on that. And so, suggestions for other parents that are perhaps in a program, post-grad or undergrad, and thinking of out-of-district placements.
I think the biggest thing is just really getting a clear understanding of what the child's needs are, whether that's done through private neuropsych testing or done through school district testing, is really understanding, where are those needs, both academically, socially, and then for the future, transition time and vocational needs as well. And then really taking a good look at the program that you're in and making sure, is that going to meet this child's needs, whether now or in the future? And if it doesn't, then you have to go out and find something that will. I really believe there are perfect schools for each kid, but the perfect school for child A is not going to be the perfect school for child B because it's so unique. So it's taking a look at, what are the individualized needs of this child and what's out there. We're starting to think about post-grad programs, a junior, but I'm always looking far ahead, and Riverview is absolutely perfect for her right now. I feel that Riverview will most likely be perfect for her for post-grad, but I also feel like I need to do my due diligence and make sure that that's the best fit. So I'm starting to look at post-grad programs and, again, just making sure that where she is now is what is going to meet her needs in the future. So starting to look around at that, also keeping in the back of my mind, after she turns 22, what are we doing then? So making sure that she has all those skills in place and the ones that she doesn't have that we're working on, some volunteer opportunities when she is home on the summers and over breaks, She's a kid, she absolutely loves younger children. She loves just helping people. So I identified, in the future, maybe a career in childcare. That might be something that's right up her alley.
Yep.
So developing those volunteer opportunities to give her some experience, and then looking at, what else is out there as potential careers for her. And, we just had a meeting at her school last week talking about, let's make sure she has exposure to a wide variety of things to not necessarily pigeonhole her into childcare, but just see what else is out there, what might interest her. And then whatever might interest her, what are the skills that she's going to need later on to make sure that, she can enter into some type of competitive employment, with or without some support.
Yep.
So
I think
it's always
perfect.
hard, but you got to keep looking ahead and finding, what your goal is, because if you can't identify a goal, a vision, then you can't get there unless you can start working towards something.
Very, very true. And I think that what you said starting out on this question about, knowing where your child is, getting a really good sense of strengths and, what the challenges are. And also, the looking ahead and staying on top of it. I think that's one thing that I didn't anticipate is the extended, I guess I would call it extended launch, and the amount of energy and time it's taken to navigate these systems. And so the more prepared you can be, like you're saying, looking ahead and doing the paperwork far ahead in advance is reasonable, and knowing what the process is and what the opportunities are is huge. And it's something that I think I guess I shouldn't say a lot, but there's probably a percentage that it's just so overwhelming, all the time, that looking ahead and planning is almost just, I don't want to say not possible, but blown off maybe because the here and now is so overwhelming. But if there's one thing that I would wish I could tell my former self, it would be that. It's to pay attention and just do a few little things,
Right. Yeah, and like you said, it's so hard because you're putting out the fires that need to be addressed today. So it doesn't give you a lot of time and opportunity to really sit back and reflect on where you want to go.
Right.
What's the end game here? So, but it is so important. They say you want your child's day before they turn 22 to look identical as the day after they turn 22, but to get there takes a tremendous amount of effort.
It does. And, I think everybody's circumstances are different, and ability to access resources and just what's available too. It's really madness. And I hate to say madness because that sounds really discouraging. It's complicated. So I think the more that people can be organized, like I've been impressed in our conversations that, you just are very organized in the way you approach things, and the piece about collecting data in the last interview that we did, and just not making it into this like emotional or adversarial battle all the time, but just kind of progressing along, and a lot of acceptance, but sticking to as many facts that you can produce, I think is great, Stacey. So thanks for that. I think it's helpful. It would be helpful for parents to hear that, because the more you can walk away from letting yourself walk down those emotional roads, because it will happen, as we both know.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. What do you see in the district right now? I know we just got a new superintendent, or what's the title? I'm trying to.
Administrator of Special Education.
Yes. Okay. So.
Yeah, she had actually sent something out, I think it was last week. I think most of the families in the district with kids on IEPs got one, announcing that she's traveling around to all the district schools to get feedback, which I think is wonderful, because you can't go ahead and implement any change without kind of understanding where have we been, where are we now, and what's needed.
I got that
so I
too,
think that's great. I am always a little hesitant of going to meetings like that, because I feel like, once one person says something negative, it can become like a pile-on of just negativity, and that doesn't really go anywhere. So I actually sat down and kind of outlined for her, like, I've been around the district for 15 years. Not only do I have my own personal experience, but I hear a lot from other families. This is what I think are the biggest needs in the district. And I think, as I did that and I kind of reread through that, I think the biggest trend that I see, which is definitely not unique to Wachusett at all, is just high expectations, and everyone around these kiddos having high expectations for them. That
is brilliant. I thought that too. Like, why did I think it's, sometimes it's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're expecting way more than, like, I know I kind of have, like, I'm living up to my mother and family's expectation based on like having typical kids. And that's hard to let go of sometimes.
Right. And you think about the expectations put on typical kids nowadays. There's so much pressure on them from the time they're little. I mean, we're teaching, reading, we're starting in preschool, it seems like.
It's like cranked up.
Yeah. Yeah. But yet, I see, and again, not unique to Wachusett, but everywhere is, especially once we take kids and remove them from general ed classrooms, we put them in sub-separate classrooms. It seems like the expectations totally change for these kids. It has been in both special ed classrooms and general ed classrooms. And when she has been in a general ed classroom, she's, the teachers understand her needs and are making modifications, but in general, the expectations are so much higher because they're used to those high expectations with typical kids in there. Mm-hmm. But I feel like once you put kids in sub-separate classrooms, it's kind of, working towards the lowest common denominator.
It's like a black and white thing. There's no in between almost that's needed.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially for kids that don't present with any behavioral challenges. If a kid is easygoing, go with the flow kind of kid, a lot of times they don't get pushed for some reason, mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's just people have pity on kids with special needs. Oh, their lives are so hard, Let's not push them anymore. Let's keep them happy. But it's the type of kid that, like most kids, if you're not going to push her, she's not going to take on anything herself. She's going to sit back and coast and play Uno all day if they'll let her.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're doing these kids a tremendous disservice because, okay, we might be keeping them happy, but is that going to help them later on? Is that going to help them hold a job or live independently or have, great friendships with people if they're not pushed outside their comfort zone when they're young? And I think that, it's just so important. Years ago, I go to the Federation conference almost every year, and they had a great keynote speaker there one year. And he was a young man who had a wide variety of disabilities.
Uh-huh.
And the one thing that he said that has always stuck with me is he said, he was talking about expectations, and he said, it wasn't that they set the bar too low, it's that they never set the bar.
Set the bar.
And that just spoke
That's
to me.
for the parent.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of times, parents go into these meetings and have these high expectations and are kind of beaten down by the team. Just,
totally.
You're unrealistic. You're asking too much. The kid doesn't have the foundational skills. I was actually just talking to a family last night, and they were saying, for years the school worked on this one particular skill because it was a prerequisite, and their kiddo just wasn't getting it. And they finally said, okay, let's step back. Let's pull this aside. Let's just give him something higher level and see what happens. Sure enough, he was able to achieve that and did a great job.
Unbelievable.
And in the process of doing that, then was able to kind of backfill and get that foundational skill.
Okay.
But because the parents really pushed him to do that, he was successful. But the school team had kind of felt firmly like, no, he needs to get the foundational skill before we can even think about moving him up.
Well, yeah, I think that's a disconnect because they're not living with the individual. And I think when you're living with someone and you've been advocating for them for so long, you become way more knowledgeable. And yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's so important too, because a lot of the time parents sit in meetings and feel like, oh, there's all these professionals around the table, and their expertise in their child kind of doesn't come out, or the parent loses their confidence that their experience is just as important as the degrees that all the people sitting around the table have.
And I think the farther along you go, the more you realize that, and you realize there's a lot of, and I don't want this to go really negative because I dislike that too. I feel like the more positive and collaborative you can be, the better, but you start to really realize that the parents get no respect. You can have been managing like we have for so many years and advocated on all these different, and a lot of times the history doesn't follow. That's one thing I failed to mention with social services is a lot of time, they're not looking at the history that they would in the under 18 crowd. They're looking just at whatever paper the last person passed to them. So yes, that's a big problem. Like medical history was not really carried over. And then it's like reinventing the wheel with each new situation. So that's kind of a segue. But I think sometimes keeping that long game in mind. I mean, I was sitting in a meeting and I was really interested in auto, and they had the auto person in the shop. And one of my things is, well, he's not getting the high school diploma. Are we going to be giving him any kind of skills that can go on his resume and like certificates? Is there anything for that? And, I realized through this process that no, they don't really have anything through that. And if I want that, I'm going to have to integrate that with mass rehab or, some DDS, go a different direction. But the guy the mechanic guy that was in the meeting who runs the auto program really understood what I was asking. And he said, yes, he can work in the auto industry. He has the skills to be able to do this. He told me exactly what skills he had that a lot of the other kids that he was grouped with didn't have. And, that was like awesome. a really important part of me being like, okay, well, this program right now is definitely not ideal, but it's what is I'm able to do for him right now. But like looking long term, I know that. And if they're not going to be able to give him the work experience that he can put on his resume and go into that field or help him get his diploma, that's a big problem. So it is. It's keeping that team like on their toes as far as, is he going to be able to get a job? Because what happened with one of my other kids is it was so like focused on these breakdown skills that there was no thought given to the long term.
Right.
And I think
that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're saying exactly the same thing, but I think I've come around it kind of backwards and realized a lot of these things, and it's never too late. That's the other thing I'd say.
Right.
It really isn't. You can backtrack, and I think I've had to backtrack, but yeah.
Just like with our kids, it might take us longer to get there, but we get there eventually.
Yep. Yep. And so, anything, I know, yeah, you've been really thorough on this, and I so appreciate it. Anything else that you are doing on projects, committees?
I think the only real new thing for me is I just have recently joined the DDS Citizen Advisory Board. So I went to a meeting, their last meeting back in the spring, and we have the first meeting to kick off this year, actually tomorrow evening. So I wanted to join that just, like I said, I'm in this learning curve, learning about, transition and adult services. So I figure if I could join that and make some connections and learn more about, what DDS does on a local level, that can not only affect, and help us personally, but also, anyone that I'm talking to, I can then share that information. So, so hopefully that'll be a positive thing. I'm looking forward to it and just kind of learning more about it and what we can use not only personally, but other people that I have connections with. So hopefully that'll go well.
Yeah, good for you. I'll be interested to hear about that. I think now I'm like so strapped for time that I wish I could do that. So I think that's another suggestion that you brought up, is the more proactive you can be getting involved in these kinds of committees and opportunities in your district, if you can, is helpful. Keeping your finger on the pulse. Yeah, I had a thought about that, the committee. Oh, I know what it is. I think the school district really doesn't. I know that I was able to transition and get a mass rehab and get them DDS, and there's not much of a connection with the school and their programming. So that's one thing that I hope that improves in the future. In fact, I think we're pretty much done with the interview. So I'm going to say thank you very much for the discussion, but I do want to ask you about that.
And that's a wrap. I kind of cut off this podcast. We were continuing our discussion, but I felt like the topic got a little bit off on a segue, so we'll save that audio possibly for another podcast episode. And I just do want to encourage you to check out our crowdfunder, doing cannabinoid medicine safety testing, developing our family cannabis guidebook. And I think this is just, I'm adding this on here, whether anybody listens to it or not, comes out of a cold, dark place in my soul related to all these medications that my loved ones with tuberous sclerosis complex are taking, and realizing that the long-term implications of polypharmacy are grim. And really, as a parent, not being able to look away from the successes that so many people are having. We are working on a polypharmacy project, so that you'll hear more about that, but also our crowdfunder and the way we're making connections through getting involved in the cannabis industry and meeting new people, talking to people across the industry. I have learned so much, and we're going to be putting together a great guidebook. So keep listening to our podcasts. If you have a chance, give us some ratings or give us your feedback. And check out our site, tsctalks.com, and keep on keeping on. Thanks.